All right, the UK is building a coalition of more than 40 countries to push to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, the president of France is responding to President Trump's criticism of NATO. Matt Finn joins us live from Dubai with the latest. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Brian, behind me is the Persian Gulf. Not too far back there is the Strait of Hormuz. And President Trump has been warning that foreign countries that heavily rely on the strait need to take the lead against Iranian terror. Well, in London yesterday, 40 countries joined a virtual meeting to discuss the urgent need to diplomatically restore the flow on the Strait of Hormuz. The British foreign minister says Iran has recklessly hijacked the strait.
Our job is to take decisions in the UK national interest. That's what this government will do, not based on any other country's priority or anything in terms of the US or other countries. It's in our interest to be working with those countries that we've gathered together today on how we ensure that the Strait of Hormuz can be reopened, how we respond to these reckless Iranian attacks on international shipping.
And French President Macron has dismissed military operations to open the strait as, quote, unrealistic. And yesterday, Macron made some pointed comments seemingly aimed at President Trump and the United States, as President Trump has been warning he may pull the U.S. out of NATO. Macron saying, when you've committed to an alliance, you live up to those commitments. This is not our operation. They can hardly complain afterward that they, the United States, are not being supported in an operation they choose to undertake alone. This is not our operation. What we want is for peace to be restored as quickly as possible. And live here in the Middle East, the loss of drinking water is a concern for some of the Gulf countries that heavily rely on desalination. And the AP is reporting right now that Iran destroyed a desalination plant in Kuwait today. And that country reportedly gets 90% of its water from desalination. Back to you, New York.
Thanks, Matt. Meanwhile, the U.S. reportedly taking out Iran's tallest bridge. We have it on video. Just one day after President Trump warned he's ready to finish the job. The president demanding the regime make a deal as they're reportedly threatening American allies in retaliation. Retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane, joined us in studio. General, great to see you. Blowing up that bridge, the president sending a message, just the beginning. They came back and showed a full screen of all the bridges, as if to say, blow them up if you want.
Yeah, well, listen, they have a lot of bluster, they have a lot of rhetoric, and they're losing all of their capability day in, day out. And what you see is the propaganda that they put out, largely for domestic audiences, but also trying to play to American audiences. Really what they want is continued opposition to the president in terms of what he's doing to break the will of the American people in supporting this war. And but the facts on the ground are real. And they are definitely losing their capability. And we're going to get to the point where we will accomplish all the assigned missions that the president has given the CENTCOM commander and Prime Minister Netanyahu has given Israeli Defense Forces. We're getting closer and closer every single day to that reality.
The Wall Street Journal writes in one of the editorials today, the only reason why Iran is surviving this war is because of the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian thinking is, at the end, the strait must remain under the control because it's their only deterrence. I guess you kind of agree with that. So what do we do about it?
Well, there's a thought that once we stop operations with all assigned objectives, we're going to go to our own self-imposed ceasefire, that Iran will eventually open up the straits. That is likely. They will likely at some point open it up. But the reality is they're in control, and we cannot let that stand. That is the issue. Not that they would open it up. It's the fact that they are in control. And that would be a strategic victory for them, because then they're impacting our allies and partners in the region. They're controlling when do they shut it down. They could shut it down again and interfere with things when things aren't exactly going their way. That cannot happen, in my view. What we have to do is open it up ourselves, and we have the capability to do that. There are well-thought-out plans to do that.
So you've seen these plans?
I understand in a general sense what it is. And those plans, the people in charge of them have a lot of confidence in doing it because they play war games and the like to do this sort of thing. We think we can absolutely accomplish that mission, and then at some point we would pass it to allies and partners for them to continue to do it. We may have to give them a couple of assets that we have that uniquely that they may not have. But nonetheless, this is a very doable, and we certainly cannot leave Iran in control where they shut that down and open it up at will. That would change the Middle East and give them huge amount of influence And that would be staggering after almost 2 months of taking all their offensive capability away from them and leave them as a huge geopolitical advantage, which that gives them.
Absolutely. And I know the president likes to bring up and give head fakes as part of his strategy, but when he said, I'm going to leave it to somebody else to open up, that's just not practical, and we can't declare victory with that Strait of Hormuz in their control. CNN has a report out today citing 3 intel officials that say half the drones remain, half the launchers remain, and the rockets on the coast of right by the Strait of Hormuz are intact. The White House pushed back on that, but you at the Institute of Study of War and all your contacts, how do you feel about this? Where do you land on this?
Well, I've never seen, I read that report, and that flies in the face, I think, is what Central Command is telling us. And certainly we're much further along than that. The reality is that the last few weeks are harder. That's the reality, because they're doing what? What are the Iranians trying to do? They're trying to hide as many of those launchers so they can preserve capability. They're moving their drones around for the same reason, so they can preserve capability. We've knocked out pretty much all of their big ships, but the small boats are real. Even though they're smaller, they can impact the Straits of Hormuz, and they're hiding those. And every time they try to use them, we kill them. So our challenge over the next few weeks is identifying targets, and we have to keep complete surveillance. We own the airspace, so we're constantly surveilling day and night. When we identify, we destroy. There's no problem in executing destruction. The challenge is identifying. But this is about vigilance. This is about discipline. This is about our capability. We're good at it. I'm just saying that it's more challenging towards the end than it was in the beginning.
So, General, when you look at our allies, I understand this is our mission. If you want to say that they weren't briefed, someone could debate that. What I find offensive is that Austria, Italy, some limitations in France, and the UK, slow to come around, are saying you can't use the bases that we finance in order to launch this operation. Do you find that disappointing?
Disappointing? That's not strong enough. It's outrageous. I mean, here we are doing something that's in our national interest, in the interest of allies in the region, to be sure, but in the world's interest. I mean, the world economy depends on a distribution of oil out of the Middle East. Everybody knows that. So the benefit that comes from pushing back the #1 predator for almost 5 decades, Iran, and taking away their capability, everybody benefits from that. And the fact that they take such a narrow view of this, I mean, the president has a right to be furious over the fact that France will not let us fly over their airspace, that Italy and Germany and Spain are not letting us. Yeah.
It's outrageous.
These are bases. These are U.S. bases, and not letting us use our own U.S. bases to support the war. What are they thinking?
Right. General George is now out, was asked to retire yesterday. He's a personal friend of yours. What do we lose when we lose General George?
He's a generational chief of staff, as far as I'm concerned. I haven't seen anybody quite like him. He's got the intelligence. He's got the discipline. His warfighting experience is enormous. He's got the warrior ethos, and he's transforming the Army and taking it into the new technology and warfare that is so changing. Right. The truth is he's leading the other services in most of all of that. Right. And I don't agree with his dismissal, for sure, because of what he's doing to the Army and the change it's impacting the department writ large.
That's what I've heard, too. General, always great to see you. Good luck at the Yankee game today and keeping up with everything. Thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, great being here.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.